Members will be aware the city is hosting the annual Cambridge Heidelberg Easter Festival, and that a civic reception for participants will take place in Guildhall on Thursday the 17th of April at 7 p.m. If you have not already let our office know, and are however, members who own or operate a lettings agency, business in Cambridge, should declare personal interest. The head of legal services does not believe this is likely to affect personal interest unless Town Hall Lettings would be a direct competitor. If any member is unsure of their position, please consult the head of legal services before the motion is discussed. I will now read out a list of items. Please indicate the appropriate points if you wish to declare an interest and explain the precise nature of your interest. Agenda item 4, Greater Cambridge City Deal. About now until about 7:30. I will use my discretion under paragraph 421 of the Council Procedure Rules to alter the order of the agenda at the appropriate time. To give people some idea, I think that probably we won't be discussing this till 7:30 or after 8. Thank you. Now, agenda item 3, public question time. I understand the following people wish to address the meeting. That's Mr. Rogers, Dr. Bacons, and Ms. Sinnott. Now, under the scheme allowing members of the public to speak at council meetings, each speaker must address his or her comments to the chair of the relevant committee or the relevant member of the executive.
Interesting information about what council is up to dried up. So my question is, firstly, why did you stop publishing responses to frequent information requests? And secondly, will you please consider starting again? Thank you very much.
Councillor Vick.
Mr. Mayor, there was a positive policy decision to post freedom of information responses on the web since it's in 2010. There has not been a policy decision not to continue with that. What has happened is regrettable, organisations or individuals, so that we can actually put information up there proactively, routinely, so that people actually don't need to ask for it individually. Anyhow, those are the reasons why the eye was taken off the ball for those few months, and effort is now being redirected after making those other improvements to getting back up to date with putting things routinely on the website as they're given. And we're looking at even some software solutions that would streamline the process of actually responding to individuals and putting it on the website at the same time.
Opposed the proposed development, arguing that it would be better as a mixed development of family housing, although some people could see a need for a mix of student and family housing. Having given forewarning of the area of the following two questions, I would like to first ask the Executive Councillor if they agree with the requirement of the 2006 Local Plan, Section 750, to restrict future developments of student accommodation to assure that it is only available to full-time students from Anglia Ruskin, the market and cost of rentals. Surely this is not the way forward for a town in down balance. If the universities are going to increase their student numbers, as they do year on year, then they do have a responsibility to house their own students, and hope the Executive Council will agree with me about this. So my last question, which comes in two parts, I've also given notice of this, is to ask how much purpose accommodation for Anglia Ruskin students is there in Cambridge? And secondly,
area appraisal 2011 and the Mill Road Development Green Rocket Sale Warehouse and Co-op Site 2007. The site forms part of proposal site R21 for mixed-use residential and employment as part of the Cambridge Local Plan proposed submission 2014, which now includes Brooklands Hospital and excludes the Moss site. In short, the Cambridge Local Plan 2014 proposed submission does not contemplate student housing on the site. Any application would be determined in accordance with the policies in force at the time the decision was being made and any other material considerations.
I'm sorry that you're too busy doing other work to answer the question properly in council.
Oh, for goodness sake.
I understand that there have been a number of blocks of student accommodation, such as Scholars House on the Brunswick site and the Varsity House, that have been built specifically for Anglo-Ruskin and Cambridge students. And that the CB1 site will contain 1,700 units with a similar restriction. This type of accommodation is one example of how to ease the difficulties of students at our two universities and should go a long way.
If you can't hear it properly, please say. We're just trying to work out whether it just needs volume tweaking or not. So if we start tweaking, don't worry. Right, our last public question, Ms. Sinnott. If you'd like to come forward and ask your question. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll stand here, can you hear me? Right. Apologies, I'm being affected by this infection. Recorded 481 cases in the city. It's estimated that only 1 in 5 incidents are ever reported, and only 30% of those that are reported enter police statistics. Follow the percentages, and you'll arrive at an estimated figure of more than 7,000 incidents in our small city in 1 year alone. When it comes to domestic abuse, what happens behind closed doors is not a private matter, but a matter of civic concern. Apart from harm, the report notes a decrease in reporting. Can Councillor Vick tell me why these clear indicators that something was going very badly wrong were not acted on? Why, also for the second year running, was domestic violence not going to be given priority status? Following my interventions at area committees, the issue was made a CCS priority. But why a tactical and not a strategic priority? And why the decision to focus on training and education?
A subject where party rivalry is the one that is the thing that makes the difference. She's asked a number of questions, and I've got a paper here with them on, which I was given as I came into the room, so I'm not sure I'm going to do justice to every one of them. She asked, she talked about the high number of incidents in Cambridge, and then the increased and then the decreased number of incidents in Cambridge. I think we have to be very careful when we try and draw, and I did refer to the fact that a single person had gone around to a number of our area committees making the same point, and I do think it's important that when we react to what just an individual person does out of the whole city, we do need to check whether that's the only evidence that we're acting on, or whether we're acting on a broader evidence base as well. But the fact was that, that the proposition that went out to consultation did include a priority for domestic violence. Ms. Synod's very commendable campaign coincided with the domestic abuse needs assessment in 2013 in telling the area of domestic abuse, where we feel strategy is right, but implementation may need attention, that it's been categorised in that way. The really concerning thing that I think has occurred in this field over the past month, in fact, to everyone's knowledge, is the report of the HMIC on Cambridgeshire Constabulary, which does underline some serious deficiencies in the area of victim support and in the area of risk assessment. And although I saw the Chief Constable is trying to play a party advantage.
Mr. would you like to have 2 minutes?
This isn't a matter of party advantage. You have been in power for 14 years, and this issue has never been raised really prominently in the public eye in Cambridge. You did say I was stirring up trouble, which for me indicated the value attached to this issue. and you shifted blame onto the constabulary. Cambridge Community Safety Partnership has police in its presence as members. Neil Sloan is the deputy director, or the whatever term he has. The role of CCSP is to monitor what's happening in the city.
Just for a second.
1 second, if I may say one last thing.
Seconds left.
Okay, one last thing and then I will stop. You said that we can't always be sure what an increase in incidents mean, and that it might well be as a result.
We have to accept there are different kinds of criminal activity, each which requires its own discrete and separate response. And that is what the partnership is doing. It's taking it very seriously, and I think the criticisms that Ms. Simmons is trying to apply here are completely inappropriate.
Thank you very much, Sean. That ends the question time, so we're going to move on. As I said earlier, we're going to plan to take action for later. So at this moment, I'm going directly on to agenda item 5, recommendations for its reduction. So recommendation, City Affairs.
Housing is wholly funded by rents and equivalent payments. So we have here an intervention which is a hugely detailed intervention just regarding a small part of the council's activity and is just one more of these little petty interferences. I think we were quite capable of having recorded votes. We genuinely have had recorded votes on budgets before we even required it. So I'm told that we could be strung up and put in jail if we vote against this. And so reluctantly we will be seen to vote that way. But I've expressed our opinion.
Members of the Civic Affairs Committee noticed a couple of issues where the current rules discriminate against members for whom standing up is a problem, and we've agreed and recommending to you also at the same time to remove those elements in 32.1 and 32.2. So I hope the Council will support this unanimously.
Thank you very much. In that case, we can move to the vote on this item, but the recommendation is as set out on page 43. All those in favour?
Training for such hearings, and there may well be members on both sides who've got particular aptitudes for this kind of work. I think thankfully there hasn't been a hearing for a while, but there may well be in the future.
Is there any more debate? In that case, Councillor Evans, would you like to rush the final?
Again, I thank Councillor Herbert for his valuable contribution on this, and it will be good.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you. The information that the council has on its own report, as it were, is of course the council tax material, which certainly records single persons because they play, or at least those who doesn't count for council tax purposes. So although these figures look nice and straightforward, they are actually not very straightforward. Going back to the 8.5 of the housing in Romsey occupied by students, a similar figure, that is 2 is in Market, for contrast, is 20.
That potentially there's a quick unbalance in the city, a problem to be looked at in light of the fact that the information that's come my way is the new builds that have happened since the 2006 local plan. The student units outstrip other forms of housing, whether it's family housing or single units. I think it's about 3 to 1, £150 a week. It's very expensive. It seems to be money's spin out property when we are continually being told that there is a shortage, a severe shortage for affordable social family housing.
At a recognised educational institution In Europe, apparently, so I understand, so I've been told, then they're exempt from council tax. So if they're doing some course in Paris or somewhere, but living in Cambridge, not quite sure why they would be, but anyway, if they are, then they're okay. But if they're doing something in the States, then apparently they get charged council tax. Yeah, don't ask me why, but, well, yes, okay.
So in the meantime, I've written on behalf of the City Council to the Chairman of the Cambridge United Football Club to congratulate him on winning the FA Trophy. So it's supplementary.
I don't think so.
Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Mayor. Number 4.
The Secondary Housing Payment has been awarded to 720 people.
Central Council for Public Places. However, it was decided at some point recently that the office in lead on this issue should be Dave Pinsett as head of property, and that fits with my portfolio. This is clearly a matter that cuts across various portfolios and was in my portfolio when I was when City Centre Management was in the portfolio as well. It is an issue that has dragged on for far too long. The City Council has been working with camp conservators and with the police to try and the refuse. For some reason, there seems to be some question about who owned the slipway. Since that's now been made clear to the head of refuse, bins will be installed in the area, Gareth Hospital Lane, slipway area, initially temporary bins, and also more refuse collections will be undertaken. But obviously, if people are actually flighting them as opposed to this being normal refuse, then prosecutions can be made against flighting.
Councillor Jordan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Find a legal solution. In terms of flighting and so on, then this is something that has only, I think, come up very recently, and certainly we should be looking at finding out who is flighting and prosecuting.
Question 6.
Mr Mayor, the answer to this is a number that I'm aware of, and I fully expect to hear about Stephen Williams, but as I wasn't present, I don't know exactly what was said. And I think in giving his supplementary question to Councillor Herbert, perhaps the press report appears to have said, and I think even that would suggest that the questioning of it was whether it actually was effective, having incentive effect as much as it should be. But I think that's perfectly valid that that was supporting the bonus. Because as he says, the new homes bonus is something that enables us to provide aspects of infrastructure for outside development contributions and big assistance to our...
I said nothing about it beforehand so that you didn't go and look. So 8 different problematic locations where dog fouling regularly occurs were selected across the whole district. And this included parts of Arbury, King's Hedges, Queen Edith's and Trumpington. I did go and look at Queen Edith's once and knew where it was. After a period of monitoring to establish a baseline of fouling in the area, a number of different posters with glow-in-the-dark watching eyes were displayed. KBT's theory was that the dog fouling problem would be displaced to a nearby area.
Councillor Swanson, what are you going to do with the information? What's going to happen next? What have you got in mind?
Well, it was a KBT research project, and therefore a report will go to KBT, who will probably pull, it was a national project, not every authority, but they will pull together reports and make some future recommendations. Certainly, open spaces will consider using the eyes again. Yes, I said some of them are staying in place, do go and look for them, and they may crop up in other parts of the city. And they're also following up something else which will amuse you, which I noticed in York. Some land
place, the line was drawn in quite the wrong place, and I think all disabled people, for a start, should have been the other side of the line. The other thing is, fairly recently I was contacted yet again, or rather, by a family who are very overcrowded and desperate for rehousing. When I said contact them again, it sounded as though it was they've been on. I mean, no, it's another family, and that is the do have bedrooms, which really are a luxury rather than a necessity, because I absolutely agree, there are quite a lot of people, particularly disabled people, for whom it is not a luxury. It is not, but as I said, we have also got the problem of people who are very overcrowded. The top and bottom of the problem is that we haven't got enough social rented houses either in this city or in the country. And that's a long-term problem, but has been whether or not those people should have had discretionary housing payments. And I certainly think there have been cases where they would have done in this city anyway. And certainly research that has been done has suggested that some district councils have been very, very sparing, shall I say, with dishing out the housing payments. Now, whether this was because they thought they would run out of money or whatever, I don't know. But I mean, if by any chance
Actually say you are against it and you will support repeal of it.
I'm not sure that I would repeal it entirely. I think there are the cases where there are 2 spare rooms, which are not needed because of either because the family, a member of the family is disabled, or there are children who are just about to get, or
Evident that when considering those who face an emergency and how easily the line can be crossed between security and crisis point. Research from Shelter shows that 8 million people could not pay their rent or mortgage for more than a month if they lost their job. And that families with children are in the most precarious situation, and with nearly a quarter unable to meet their payments at all without finding another job immediately. And where is the safety net to help those who struggle? Crisis loans and community care grants. It cannot be right that payday loan companies like Wonga have seen their profits rise by 36% to £62 million in 2012, and then again to £100 million in 2013. As I've said before, I know how some Dorset lending is conducted, and is definitely targeted the most vulnerable, with no concern about how they can pay back anything they borrow. Nobody with any idea of how difficult life has become for so many so quickly. When 50% of one of these loans has been repaid, it can be refinanced. I can see no reason why you can't support this motion. Therefore, I do urge you to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Can I call for Councillor to second the motion, please? Thank you very much. Would you like to speak now, or is it? No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Research from Oxfam states that 1 in 5 people in Britain are currently living in poverty. Falling incomes due to the downturn and rising costs of basic essentials mean people in work and not claiming benefits are struggling to get by. Indeed, more working households are living in poverty now, as a quarter of households will be unable to cope with an emergency situation of needing to replace or repair broken electrical goods, up from 12% in 1999. The research also found that a third could not afford to regularly save, up 5% in 1999, and 12% in 2012 admitted that they couldn't afford to take out home contents insurance, up 2% on 1999. As has been referred to in the past, individuals and families who suffered emergency hardship and financial difficulties could make an appeal to the discretionary housing fund, social fund, overseen centrally by the DWP. In 2012, this month, the Welfare Reform Act, the government decided to scrap it and instead give money on a year. Individuals and families in Cambridge who find themselves in extreme hardship and destitution because of events beyond their control will now have no final safety net from either the state or the county council. That is, unless a decision is made to continue the scheme set up and fund it out of its core budget. But when judged in the context of swinging cuts to overall local government budgets. It's very unlikely a county council wants to keep this money because of the need to keep green fence and statutory services going. And the Cambridgeshire Local Assistance Scheme isn't one of those. The Tory chair of the Local Government Association, Sir Merrick Cottle, agrees. He says, for some councils, providing crisis payments for those in practically
Councillor Johnson, are you winding up?
I am mindful. A dominant approach and practically thinking of solutions to mitigate the impact of the fund's demise will help avoid such a due-to-date scenario for those in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any debate? Councillor Bill?
So now I'd like to move an amendment, so perhaps just pause while it's circulating. What the proposed seconder of the motion have described. I have some additional reasons for doing so, and I can contest some of the political rhetoric that's gone with what they've said. I propose to do two things with this amendment. Still building on the initial paragraph, which is a statement from Citizens Advice Bureau. It's a national statement on their behalf. It's not a local one, but may be valid, relevant locally. Things that we want to do is to actually support the LDA in trying to get that decision changed. I'm replacing with the amendment the final section, the taking of action. And I'm doing so because I think that there are legitimate concerns about this. And I'm interested in making sure that we pursue them as a council in the most effective way. The scheme here is run by the county council. It's a responsibility they've taken. 3,000 had been spent by the end of December. And on the back of that, the next year's budget has been reduced to 500,000. It seems to me a very questionable decision, given they're trying to build evidence of a year in which their scheme patently was not fully in place. And I'm very concerned about that. Even if we just only look at the forthcoming financial year, it's something that needs to be got right. And I think that there are legitimate grounds for scrutiny on that alone. I also think there are legitimate concerns about the Conservatives, just like the Liberal Democrats have. We are all somewhat in the same camp in respect to this now. We each may choose and need and want to advocate against the rough edges of what happens consequent to that kind of policy. And that's fair enough, and that's exactly what I think we're generally agreeing to do now. But it is a little bit rich that the opposition conduct themselves on this side of the matter with a holier-than-thou attitude, which would appear to accept.
I mean, I don't know whether you can give me an assurance now that we can go down that line, or you will accept that little bit remaining, and we can move on, Mr. Mayor. Well, would you like me to add it? I'm not sure how you would like it. I mean,
So just you're asking whether it could refer to a scrutiny report to one of our committees rather than council. I think
a scrutiny committee, then that doesn't need a motion of council. If council advises calling for a report, then it's probably better to do that by way of amendment, because councils have a right to put items on the agenda, but that doesn't necessarily mean that officers will prepare a report, or officers will try to
Thank you. Thank you very much. So what I suggested is just to make sure we keep going is we do this amendment and then you try another one to have the report to scrutiny afterwards, should you wish. Right. Any more debate on this? Councillor Lowe? No.
Well, I just want to relate to Councillor Bitt a tale I got. I know that Councillor Bird can tell some stories as well, but I don't think it's fair to suggest that our side, or the Labour government, if there is one after 2015, swallow some of the multiple hits that you're changes to the welfare system, particularly for disabled people, and particularly delayed payments. It is no accident that people are going to Cambridge Food Bank, Councillor Dick. Sorry, Councillor Dick, and and that is just how people have had to deal with the situation that they find. So I have heard stories in the last year that I have not.
To get to that stage of proceedings. So I think the issue for me is the urgency, because we are less than a year away from the scrapping of this scheme, which has helped an awful lot of people over the years in terms of periods of crisis, and will clearly be needed in the future.
If there's any more debate, so no one's indicated, I'll put this out to second if they want to say anything.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to make any controversial points, and I'm going to endeavour not to make any controversial points, not least because as part of the intentions of the main motion, and say that in terms of the amendment, that we would be very much looking to find a constructive way forward, and certainly in terms of a further amendment, I think the easiest way would simply be to say that to add on to the end of this, and requests a report back to the Community Services Scrutiny Committee, because I think implicit in point 4 about involving the 5 district and city councils, then clearly if Cambridge City Council is being involved in trying to keep the county accountable, and we have a role to play in that, then a report to Community Services.
Councillor Smith actually said herself then, which if we could add, and we could add it wherever you like really, but at the end of number 4, that this council therefore asks for a report to be brought to Community Services Scrutiny Committee in October. Yeah.
Can I help you?
Oh, please do.
It might be easier for the reading of it to suppose a whole new major paragraph at the end, after where 4 is, but not after 4.
Okay.
Not as 5.
I believe I need to.
Okay, so we need a seconder for it. Councillor Pitt, would you like to speak now or reserve?
Reserve.
Okay. Any debate on that? Okay. Seconder reserve reply. You still want to know, but okay. Right to reply. Councillor Brown. No. Okay, Councillor Cross.
I think.
Right, should we the vote on that second amendment? So be clear about it? Okay, all those in favour?
Unanimous?
Mr Mayor, Council is invited to support the agreement to the principles of the Greater Cambridge City deal based on the government's offer at the end of a very lengthy and sometimes complex negotiation. The main elements of the deal are an injection of up to 500 million in the road strategy, and to do so far more fully and far faster than would otherwise have been the case. This funding is one of the key factors in enabling our local plans to happen, and happen at the pace we'd like to see that. By helping us tackle the congestion that is one of the manifestations of Cambridge's success, it will remove one of the main obstacles to success, transport and planning. But it also means planning in the city and planning in South Cambridge. So that, as Ray Manning, leader of South Cambridge, has said at our Strategy and Resources Scrutiny meeting last week, next time round it will be one single local plan. This is what our public and businesses here have been crying out for. As a council, with our partners, we will need to agree how a single local plan will be achieved, as I expect we'll want the results to justify taking this further to see if a viable economic model could be defined for us to pitch into that problem in a completely different way. This all remains work ahead of us, but an interesting avenue appears to have opened up and implies that the city deal governance may well evolve to encompass the sphere of some common housing strategy. Fourthly, redirecting vocational skills spending. I see this area as offering a critical tool to provide inclusion, proving successful in winning ownership from employers for a problem that they need to also invest in helping to solve. Fifthly, joint governance for Greater Cambridge. This deal represents our first step into the policy areas of transport and skills, and that's a very exciting step. It means that elected representatives from this city will become direct decision takers slowly. I think we have built a lot of that in this process. We've now got the platform to develop that some more, maybe strengthening the logic and the evidence that a single tier of operation can work rather well. That this broader geography of city and surrounding rural area actually makes a lot of mutual sense in our area. In an environment of scarcity of public money, by any standards, the financial side of this deal is excellent. Look at deals negotiated by other East Anglian cities and in the rest of the country, and make your own mind up about it. More is always nice, but there is also a time to know when you've got as good as you're going to get, and that's now. It's now up to us what we make of it, and to prove our point about local autonomy and joint decision making, and I would urge the Council to support it.
4 or 5 years. The best that we can hope for is 25 million a year. That's how it will be released on the basis of that first 4-year period. The A14 project is going to cost £1.5 billion. I know that this is quite extra to that, but I just want to give you an understanding that of the scale of costs that infrastructure actually incurs. It's estimated that it costs. Now these are important tests because what they mean is that we are subject to the vagaries of history. We've gone through a period not so very long ago of economic recession which affected this city, where the construction of housing in this city was very considerably held up. So the idea that Cambridge is somehow immune from the accidents of history is nonsense. We will be affected as well as anyone else
should there be such a downturn, and if there is a downturn, then that final funding per annum, in order to very considerably reduce the impact of that funding. It also excludes, as the leader has pointed out, any meaningful assistance to the house building programme, especially affordable housing. And it may well be that not oversell this thing. And finally, I would like to say that I appreciate the remarks of the leader with respect to governance. I think this really does represent a breakthrough in the prospect that we might come together with our partners in the county and in South Cambs, and that it will lead organically towards a system of government that is more unified in its character and approach.
Now, as Councillor Hipkin has said, there's different ways that you can calculate that, but we do have to start with whether there is a completion of the jigsaw or not, and we'll come back to that. There are elements, the other elements which are really important are the joint working. We pressed for there to be a single local plan, and we have quite a lot of additional complexity and bureaucracy going into the local plan inquiry in the summer, that we still have two separate plans. And that we do welcome apprenticeships, we welcome the opportunities of trying to understand where is the growth in the Cambridge economy, and clearly in the area of technicians, in laboratories, in other parts of the new tech industries, that offers real opportunities that are not being grasped enough. And so that's a plus. I think Councillor Vick should have placed a little bit more credit with South Cambridgeshire for the work on housing. It's South Cambridgeshire that's created a housing development company, and one that we should have been involved in tranche, the 2025 arrangement. We really want to see the wording. I think residents want to see the wording. I think John Bridge wants to see the wording, because he's very suspicious that the last big payment will not be forthcoming. The difficulty for the three councils is we don't need the transport infrastructure in 2025, we need it by 2020. So I don't think Councillor Vick would have put quite as much gloss, or had the leader of his party here today putting even more gloss on it, if it was an election. It's mentioning improving Milton Road, improving Newmarket Road, links to St Neots, and the actual list of schemes is very heavily weighted to the rest of the county. In a way, the strategic economic plan almost looks like a deal for the rest of Cambridgeshire, albeit that we hope that a large amount will come here. But the money that is available for transport will not match the gap. We have to sign on the tubes of Mind the Gap. Well, we have to mind the gap here, Councillor Vick. There is a significant gap still there. We already see that our inner ring road is dysfunctional. We haven't had a proper city centre transport strategy for a decade or more. One of the impacts of the failure of the last 10 years of a lot of development without appropriate infrastructure is that our city itself is grinding to a halt. And clearly we have a high list of, and a long list of measures, obviously cycling, but simply to reorient how our city works, so that it is actually not somewhere that draws in large amounts of lorries and cars.
To support children and young people and learners in making decisions that will help support the Cambridge economy is a really welcome development, and something that we should all in this chamber support, and I hope we all do. I also was going to whisper something about the unitary authority and the direction of travel, but as my leader has already said that, I won't whisper it, I'll just say it. It could be an important first step towards a sensible unitary for this area. 5 years ago, what was on offer was a county unitary, and I don't think that would be, we'll get our grants no matter what, we know where we stand on that. For the first 5 years. So, ideas is apparently hilarious. Overall, this is good news. So let's not be the prophets of doom. Let's actually celebrate the achievement here and vote for it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pippas.
Mr. Mayor, I welcome and strongly support the proposed CDDL. As a local business person,
I work for instance with Sandy Lynn, who does a lot of congratulations for the fruits of his labour and seeing the right day. And so it is to be welcomed. It's certainly better than nothing, and it will go a long way to, or at least some way, to addressing some of the infrastructure problems that we face. But we shouldn't just, close our eyes, our fingers and our ears, and listen to any of the potential issues. I've got just outline a couple of things that I think that we need to think about. First of all, I think I have this horrible suspicion that there's going to be a tendency, and there already is a tendency creeping in, I think, to any problem at a certain level of economic growth, which is yet to be defined. So to say, this is this money needs to get out of jail pre-card that is going to solve all of our problems, when actually the hurdles to be jumped over could be quite considerable. I think we need to bear this in mind. We also need to bear in mind what Councillor Hitton said about how sometimes what looks like a lot of money, if it is a lot of money, is easily eaten up in infrastructure and transport projects. Just the third, I won't drag this out too much longer, just the third point. 3 different local authorities with at least two, and maybe at least 2 different political parties in control of them. So I think that may be wishful thinking, to be honest, and I think if there is not a consensus that we can wish on what is, although considerable scarce resources, then there needs to be robust government arrangements in place which ensure that the people who take decisions in the long run are people with the electorate can get rid of. Not people who young people can get rid of, or I wouldn't get rid of a pro-vice chancellor from some affairs as far as I can see. They only have a vote in these things of KGMAs, which I don't necessarily think that they're democratic left. Okay, they're democratic.
33,500 houses proposed within the 2 local plans. In terms of the transport strategy, a lot of projects that have been worked up, a lot of projects that need to be worked up further, but there are an awful lot of projects to deal with the provision both of the transport deficit we face at the moment, and also to help the delivery of some of the employment and housing requirements that the local plans have identified. £20 million over the next 5 years. We have always, as local councils, received grants in some shape or form annually from whatever government is in power to meet the growing economic needs of this community. But actually, to quote Charles Dickens, it is a case of please can we get some more, because this is what it's about. This is, from what I can see, not sufficient to meet both the deficit we had to contend with, the problems that that's caused for the last number of years. And looking at the complexity and the detail of the plans and the transport strategy, there's an awful lot there that needs to be funded, and whether this initial funding, though welcome, is enough, we will see. Yes, watch this space, as Councillor Pippa said, but let's be realistic.
In 2000 was the first teaching member of the university to leave this council. I only knew one previous teaching member who wasn't a university councillor, and they were mostly persons, who was a member. He, in order to be able to pursue his academic career, he had to leave after a relatively short time to have a very distinguished career, in fact, just Lord Hunt, as he named. But the engagement of the university, which is, this isn't new, it's not happened just today, that's all. It's been growing for quite a time. I remember on this council who were teaching at the university today. But it is a mutual. Oh, I haven't finished writing what I was going to say. So it will be very short. Behind some of the rhetoric we've heard tonight, there has been constructive scrutiny from around the chamber, which I have to say something that is very unusual to hear in this council, but it's welcome. I'm reassured that in this constructive scrutiny I haven't heard any point
to work together. Other shared services have had very lengthy negotiations, and perhaps in the future, partly through this deal, it will become easier to negotiate shared services and perhaps ultimately that unitary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say a little bit about the housing element, though I would admit this is only going to be half the speech that I intended to make, and I'm going to say the other half for later. We had wanted the cap on the HRA to change their mind. So, in many ways, it's a safer bet. How we actually deal with that kind of borrowing outside the HRA is something which obviously we've got to consider and consider the options. We have, as councillors opposite know, looked very seriously at the arrangements for borrowing within the HRA and adjusted our set-aside so that we can put affordable housing and very, very bring forward the to build those needs, to build so that we can have those needs. And we know from
we've been talked about not being joyous about this money. We are joyous. Any money coming forward has got to be welcomed. We're not Jeremiah's, but we don't want to be envisioning clause as well. When we go, oh, fantastic, fantastic. And then when we look at it, it's not what we first expected. We talked about skills funding. Well, maybe this coalition could give the correct amount of money to the schools for the pupils as well. That would help in education. So yes, we welcome this 100 million, not the 500 million, because that's not been guaranteed yet. So we welcome the 100 million, and we look forward to getting this Cambridge City.
Spent £5 grand removing a phone box. I mean, that's what worries us, is that don't promise people things that you can't actually deliver. You've got 100 million, brilliant, but no more right now.
Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think it just saddens me that what we're hearing tonight from the opposition in particular is very much, thank you for the Christmas present, very gracious, shame it wasn't wrapped in gold.
A slightly longer period than 15 years. This is also progressive and the two match each other. He also talked about the threat of a change of government. Well, interestingly and amusingly, it's a question that got put to the Deputy Prime Minister this afternoon. What happens if there's a change in government? And his answer was, well, the only people you can ask that question to are the Labour Party. and so there is then some underlying onus on the other side of the chamber on that question. And Lord Caslick also talked about, my understanding is that that may not actually be the right vehicle for delivery of the affordable housing that we'd like to try and boost. My understanding of that model is that it's intended as a profit-making venture to supplement the income of the council for other services. What I think we would need, according to what our commitment is inside the city deal, is a not-for-profit operation which could deliver economically housing close to the affordable model. And I don't think that is quite... I think Councillor Owers makes a good point, and I can see that coming too. I didn't see a good point coming, but I think the point he makes is a valid one. But knowing how these things work, the city deal becomes a vehicle that becomes the repository for everything that everyone wants doing. And I do think that it's going to be important to keep it focused, although on the others that have helped get us this far. And as I said at the Scrutiny Committee, that's officers from all three councils who've all contributed in different ways. But in our case, that's predominantly been Andrew Lynn, who has worked extraordinarily hard above and beyond what any officer should have to think about over such a sustained period. And I think it's largely a tribute to him that this council has played a very, very full part in this whole exercise. And good office, but I still insist, are some very important, very substantial.
As we said, that it's inevitable that landlords will often need someone to provide them with a service of matching them up with suitable tenants. Furthermore, it's also true that no one is denying that some letting agencies, many landlords nature of the market for in the private sector, housing sector in Cambridge, in which the bargaining power is really stacked against prospective tenants, means that very often letting agents can use the fact that they have the upper hand to extort as much money as they possibly can in hidden fees and charges from tenants. And in the process, it makes people's lives very awkward and stressful at a time which is usually stressful enough. It was actually pointed out that it benefits landlords and agents in several ways. Firstly, it means that tenants, since they're only, in many cases, will only be living in a place for a short period of time, often are unlikely to want to go into the hassle of arguing or going into a dispute over rent or a dispute over a deposit or a number of other things. It's much easier usually to just kind of grin and bear it, put up with it and move on. Secondly, the churn also gives letting agents the ability to charge for endless changes to contracts, changes in tenancy, requests for new references, and so on. So that what we have, in summary, is a volatile market with a lot of churn and demand far outstripping supply, which is unsurprisingly a gold mine for a middleman. Fee. Some letting agents even charge cleaning fees, even when the house or the room is left in a perfectly clean condition. Some of them charge it regardless of whether it's dirty or not. And then possibly the most outrageous are the credit check fees. I was doing some research into this, and I know several letting agents have been able to charge £50 for a credit check fee, which, when large letting agents buy them in bulk, a credit check fee can amount to, charge the letting agent can amount to 20 pence, which they then charge, they have them as a £50 charge. It's a deposit protection scheme that many landlords and agents, and most of the most responsible ones, do use. However, it seems to me that it's dragged up to be the case that lettings agents, a standard, charge 1.5 times a month's rent for the deposit, which I think is excessive. I don't think there's any need to have a deposit which is higher than the first month's rent, personally. When you add that to all the other non-returnable fees, which can amount to hundreds of pounds, the strain that's put on people's resources when they're trying to find somewhere to live is immense. There is also the issue that the tenant deposit scheme, although it's a good scheme, and I'm not going to criticise it, per se capped rest, seeing as you're actually in charge for it. The contrast with now with living in a flat which your landlord is a college, I wouldn't want to generalise that all colleges at university, it is immense. There are no hidden fees or charges, a rent deposit that was only 1 month's rent, no requirements of guarantors, no credit checks, and at the end of it a much more stable tenancy. However, this situation is one for a relatively lucky few. Not many who have to rent in the private sector are that lucky. So the excellent work that we've seen that has already been put into the town website, which really is so dysfunctional at the moment. Maybe it will even provide some competition to the commercial lettings agents and force them to cut out some of the practices that they do in the private market as it exists. It will put this city council on the side of those who are being exploited in our overheated housing market, rather than on the side of the letting agents and the landlords. So I hope that you can all support this motion.
Thank you. Now, is there a second? Councillor Roberts, second. Do you wish to bring that up?
Obviously, it's as always with Moses, it's something that's very quite important. Obviously, private letting agencies perform badly, but when they do, they really are absolute rotters. But while we would do well to recognise that there are not many things that the City Council could necessarily do, I think at the very least putting a report forward and seeing, what potentially could be done would be quite good. I would add that in setting the bar in terms of private rental, private lettings, because of the sheer shortage of housing in Cambridge, I think it's clear to many of us that the bar at which you are setting standards within the private rental market here in Cambridge. And then all I would add to that is, there are many things that we do here and play around with that don't really have much of an impact on everyday lives for a lot of people. But here in Cambridge, you know from your own walk, the amount of people that you knock on the doors of, there are many people in the rental sector in Cambridge. I remember when I was first elected on the first committee I went on as a report on people's feelings about the rental market and so on. And we know it's an issue, and I think this is something which, it might not be, it might not work, but it's worth a try, it's worth looking into, it's worth seeing.
Social effect, and therefore look forward to interest and its and it grows.
Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As people who've looked at their pack will know that I'm about to propose an amendment, but actually I'd like to sort of make a more, not speak only to the amendment, but to the general things as well. Because Councillor Wardwell stole my line, because I was about to say that I know that Councillor gets a bit upset if I say that I agree with him. I don't think Councillor Robert quite as much. Market. And that, of course, is a problem, one aspect of the problem of success that the city has. The whole housing market, the rented, the market area, the pressure on affordable housing, the whole lot is all part of that. And it is not straightforward to deal with it. Deal with it, though, we must try to. And of course, and this is where the amendment comes in, the city deal may provide some way. Part of the market is something that hopefully we might manage to help a bit. As it's principally a question of supply, we do some things. With our property accreditation scheme, we do try to give some kind of accreditation obviously, to reasonable letting agents who do not go in for the slightly exaggerated practices. I will admit it's been my ambition, an ambition I have not yet managed to fulfill. That's already been scheduled, as your briefing pack tells you. But as I said, I think rather than say in a sort of miserable sort of way, don't think it will work, I would like to propose an alternative area to explore, which hopefully might work.
Okay, the second is that Councillor Blackwood.
I was at my right.
Councillor Rosenstein? You had indicated.
I think I want to speak on the main right.
Councillor Smart rather made a very good point, which she said that it's something joint venture with the university, who obviously postgraduates and some undergraduates are many of the people who have to go into the private market, and maybe also with AIU. I think that may be a fertile territory to look into. But so let's not completely give up on the idea of expanding social agencies in the community market. But I appreciate that this is a constructive attempt to make the motion better, and thank you very much. So I accept the amendment. Can I do that?
Thank you very much. Let's vote on the amendment then. All in favour?
What I think has changed is that the values of natural property have gone up so far ahead of inflation, and the returns from alternative investments have gone relatively down, certainly recently. And so the housing market's become stressed in a number of other ways, particularly trying to get money out of them. Members may not realise, but for a brief time, nearly 2 years ago, I was a landlord because I was my mother's personal representative and she was a landlady letting a property, or my parents had a property, and she was managing that for the last 10 years of her life. And recently, horrified me, what is the point of all this trying to achieve? Because there are basic things that landlords want assurance of, like the rent will be paid. When my mother's tenants moved out, they owed 2 months' rent and the deposit was only enough. So it was slightly less than 1. So we lost a certain amount of money out of that. But there you go. That wasn't, the agency wouldn't help there because the problem is actually the bank because they're close to the account. So it's not as far as the tenant's fault. What matters is, and that's why the idea behind this motion is a good one, because if we can put some sort of cachet on
to answer questions which are genuinely intended to be scrutiny questions. They may sound very sceptical, but I do think they need to be answered. I think Alan Carter's briefing note has been extremely helpful. And what he's saying to us is that, first of all, this scheme is a trial scheme. only to last a year. And that if it is to continue, a very robust business case has got to be made out for its continuation. So my question really is, how is this going to be financed? If this service is not going to be substandard and for a subclass of tenants, then it's got to be properly administered and properly staffed, and it's got to be efficient, and it's got to have the respect of both landlords and tenants. If it doesn't have that, it's just not going to work, and it's going to cost a great deal of money for very little return. So that is basically what I'm hoping that he will answer in his closing remarks.
Because I say, to help those who do find it a difficult matter to deal with, I think something we should be, responsible councillors, willing to get involved in. Yes, there may be a cost, but we don't know that until we know what we are best able to do to assist. But clearly we need to take on board this growing number of people who are in the rented sector. I've not moved recently, I don't move quite so often as ours, but I live through it all, and I think if we are able to assist them, either with our own agency or with some way of informing people as to what these agents in the city are about, I think that's a start.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Pitt back on this. I think we get a bit of professional viewing going here, so perhaps we won't have too much delay on this. Sorry? Do I get one? Oh, I think one more speaker before we get to that. Councillor Pitt.
I think this might be the final round, and Councillor Owen's pop in. By and large, I agree with George. I think one place that I think just needs to be, but I think the correct place for that scrutiny is in scrutiny, so I'll sit there.
Right, so let's move to the rest of the items. Councillor Smart, would you like your right to reply first?
I don't think I've anything to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Owen.
Yes, I agree with George.
I'll keep it brief. Just to respond to Councillor Hickey's questions which are accepted in the spirit of it. Obviously, I can't give a comprehensive business case, so I'm at a fairly early stage of the benefits of the landlords either. In my view, landlords don't like a lot of instability because they want somebody, a reliable tenant who will pay the rent. And tenants want stability. They want to be a reliable tenant who will pay the rent and will stay there for a while. Letting agents have a very progressive interest in instability and churn. And sometimes they actually artificially try to fabricate that churn because they will say, oh, the landlord isn't sure whether he wants you to stay for another 6 months because they make up things. And then if you hold your nerve, it turns out actually the letting agents were I can't use that word, but they were lying, were true, considerably. So I hope that we can address some of these, in more detail, these issues when the report does actually come, and we can look at it in detail. And if we do take control of the council, it's something we will look at very carefully indeed. And unless there are suitable problems or it looks like it will be substantially too problematic in a fundamental way, something that we will put our political will behind.